And before we start, and partially to test how this is, because this is my first time talking at GDC and my first time presenting in this room, I want to show you a video, very, very short video. I play cricket. I don't believe that that is a sport that translates over here a lot. But I play cricket, and the reason I play cricket is because it's the best sport in the world. Thank you. The best sport in the world for playing while drinking, because you can play it on a Saturday afternoon, and you can sit there with maybe a bottle of vodka, and the ball will come to you, and you can stop it or ignore it, and that's excellent. But I love it a lot, and I try really, really hard. My speciality in cricket, the position I train to be, is a bowler, and I practice every season. And I put in so much time, so much effort into being the best bowler I can be. And, as you can imagine, even if you don't know cricket, it's very personally wounding to me when a batsman hits the ball and it goes miles. So, with that in mind, I want to show you something that happened 2 weeks ago to me. I don't know if this starts automatically. So something to bear in mind is that noise that you're hearing in the background, we're playing underneath a flight path right now, right? So the planes are coming overhead. In many ways, those planes are a metaphor for how angry I am that he's just hit me, okay? The camera is behind the stumps. And as I step up, wait, boom. You can't plan for something like that, right? You can't make something like that happen. That's not the presentation. You should learn to embrace things like that. Okay, Sarah, can we get the lights, please? Okay. A 1,000 million light years from here, all the way on the other side of the universe, there is a planet that is Earth's perfect twin. This is not a guess. I'm not claiming this based on statistics and probability. It's not an idle hypothesis, a thought experiment. It's true. And I know it's true because I've talked to someone who lives there. The planet is called Helicon, and its people, the Helites, look just like us. 2 arms, 2 legs, a mouth, 2 eyes. Their men and women are biologically the same as us, except for one single, simple difference. Helites' hearts work differently to ours. When a Helite is born, at precisely the moment she takes her first breath, her heart starts beating. And 2 billion beats later, her heart stops. The number 2 billion is absolute, non-negotiable, and always falling. What does it mean? At rest, a Helite's heart beats around 60 times per minute. During sleep, that rate is lower, and when Helites are excited, the rate goes up. When Helites are asleep, it goes down, but basically it's 60 beats in an Earth minute. So 2 billion beats, all they've got to last a lifetime, takes about 3.5 million Earth minutes, or 500,000 Earth hours, or 63 Earth years. And then it's over. The heart stops beating, friends and family grieve, the sun sets, the sun rises, and the world moves on, just as it does on Earth. What does that number 2 billion mean to a Helite? It means life, and then it means death. It means everything. I said Earth minutes, years, because the Helites don't measure time like we do. They measure time in beats. Why would they use anything else? Their internal clocks meter out their lives with more care than we. They know lunch will be ready in a few hundred beats. They call a friend and ask, hey, what are you doing in 2000? We should go for dinner sometime, maybe later. 4,000, 4.5. Of course, since each Helite's clock is personal, speeding up or slowing down depending on the owner's activity, social plans can be a nightmare. So Helites use a universal constant too, Helicon's sunset, their creator's heartbeat in mythology. Now that's just a legend, a fairy tale, but they still use the language. Days are hearts, and a Helite will see God's heartbeat 23,000 times before their time is up. 2 billion beats across 23,000 hearts. Make the most of them, child, because you won't get any more. So this is my first time speaking at GDC, and thank you all for coming. It's 10 a.m. and it's a big deal. It would be a big deal for me. So we'll see how it goes. My name's Ste Curran, and this is me right there. I'm enjoying a surprise, really enjoying it. Today I want to tell you some stories. Some of them are scripted, some of them aren't. And they're about me, they're about Helicon, and they're about the things I remember from the last decade. I'll tell you about what I do, and I'll talk about some of the things I think are important, some of the moments I remember. That is the plan, at least. So yes, I am Ste, I am him up there. And it's difficult. I do a lot of things. Here are some. I've written lots and lots and lots of words about games, some other things, mostly games. I've designed some video games too. I have a radio show, that's that up there. I just kick-started a game about karaoke. It's brilliant, you should back it, obviously. I've just started a consultancy, that's in the middle there. That's new, that's important. I think that's the first time anyone's seen the logo, so there we go. And I lecture at colleges and dev studios, and I speak at conferences, and you know that because you're here. Hi. Earlier this year, I was creative director at my own startup as well, and that felt like a big, big thing at the time. But after 18 months of, at best, partially enjoying that, I left. And a few months ago, I found myself asking this question: now what? So I am grateful, genuinely grateful for the opportunity to explore that question with you all today. So we're going to spend the next 50 minutes going through my resume on LinkedIn. And if you've got any opportunities for me, just put up your hand. I'm joking, obviously I'm joking. But now what? What now? Now what? It's a haunting question, right? I've been working in the video game industry for 10 years, and that is a long, long time. 300 million heartbeats. It's a good time to reflect. Where were we 10 years ago? The next generation is imminent, and I'm sure a lot of you have been thinking and talking and discussing that while you're here. But for a second, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to think about 2003, 10 years ago. It's the PS2 Xbox era, several years before the launch of the 360 and the Wii. How many of their core features we take for granted now? There was no Wii, there was no social gaming revolution, no Kinect, of course. Microsoft still focused on the hardcore. No PSP, no DS, let alone the 3DS, let alone the 2DS. Lots of Nokias, really lots of Nokias. And Apple hadn't blown apart the casual social gaming space with the iPhone. And there were indie games as well. I mean, there have always been indie games, but they were not called indie games back then. And they certainly weren't making the sort of social, financial, cultural impact they are now. Things move so fast. 10 years ago feels like such a long time. These events on the board, they affected us all because of the industry we share, our living, our pastime. But both memory and impact are subjective, victims of brutal, terrifying editing by our brains. We all experience the same history, but I don't remember everything that's happened over the last 10 years, and neither do you. Hell, when I think about my own life, I don't remember everything. And that's stuff I've actually lived, not just read about on Eurogamer. We forget things all of the time. Why? Because somewhere in your brain, a smaller version of you is taking in everything that happens and throwing out so much, distilling the things that do matter down to moments. So when we reflect on an experience, and an experience can be anything from a poem to a AAA game to the last 10 years of the games industry to your whole goddamn life, we do not remember it as a whole, but as a series of points, great moments or terrible moments. You see a movie, you listen to a song, you look at a painting, you live your life. All of these things happen to you in real time, but you only retain fragments. And you don't get to choose which ones. Your brain is a collection of vine clips of the things that have affected you for better or for worse. So that's the thing. We might share a common history, but the way we remember things, that's different. And the way we remember them is also personal. You are not all of the things you have been through. You are only your moments. Aoife, my friend from Helicon, forced me to start thinking about moments. It was 3 a.m. when my phone rang, waking me from a dream I immediately forgot. Like everyone with implicit, always-on anxiety, I immediately assumed someone had died. I prayed it was a cold caller. Hello? Hello? Cold caller. That signature pause, hiss, click, as their bastard technology tells the operative you've answered. Motherfuckers. Selling something. Hello? More aggressively this time. Just static. Static. And just as I was about to hang up, fucking cold callers, I heard this tiny voice broadcasting from across the universe.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Oh my God.
A whisper, distorted. I'm awake now. Who is this? I asked.
Please, stay there.
The voice is calm, shaken. Are you okay? Who is this?
I need to talk to someone.
Came the voice, distant and broken. I think you've got the wrong number. Who are you?
My name is Aoife. You are someone, and I need someone. More than ever right now. I don't know what to do.
But seriously, where?
Please don't hang up. I don't know what to do next.
She asked me about my graph. She said she'd finished hers. She didn't know where she was going. This was all too much. I didn't know what that meant, and I told her, but she said it didn't matter. It didn't matter. She told me to keep talking, stay on the line, tell her anything. Tell her about something good that had happened to me recently. So I told her about this amazing ice cream I'd had that afternoon, and she said that wasn't enough. She wanted to know something I'd remember forever. I told her the ice cream was pretty good, and she laughed, but she asked again. A moment that meant something, she said. No, wait, not a moment, the moment. What's a moment?
The first thing you remember when I ask you to think of something.
What's something?
Your life.
Well, this then, right now, you calling me in the middle of the night. There's a silence, crackle like a shortwave radio.
No.
Then,
No. Before this. The last couple of years.
nothing,
Go back. Further. You're dying.
she says, a note of frustration in her voice.
You're literally dying right now. What's the moment you remember?
So I told her about something I'd made and how it brought me full circle. I told her about a puzzle game and the moment it gave back to me. 10 years ago, I made a decision to switch from writing about video games to making video games, and 3 years ago, it paid off. Music games have always been important to me. They were why I ended up in the games industry. I was all set to write about pop culture after finishing university, already freelancing for style and music magazines. But 2 months from the end of my degree, I went to a house party, and lost and looking for the bathroom, I wandered into a room where 2 people were playing Parappa the Rapper. And in that moment, my world changed, though I didn't know it at the time. Prior to then, I thought all games were about driving and shooting and killing, and that was fun, but I didn't really care too much about it. After this point, I saw a new world where you could create anything, where maybe even I could create anything, and everything in my life changed. Everything. So it was I ended up writing about video games, and so it was I ended up making video games, predictably for Zoe Mode, a developer who specialized in music games. I worked on playful things like SingStar and Guitar Hero SKUs for a while, pitching, being rejected, pitching again. It was fun. It was so much disposable fun. Until Zoe signed up with Martin Duran's charity One Big Game, and I was given some time and some space to make the game I wanted to make. Chime wasn't only mine. I mean, so much of the game belonged to dozens of other people at the studio, those who helped prototype, build, finish it. But by the end of the project, I had this feeling of ownership, feeling of authorship I'd never had before with a game. The same sort of authorship I'd had with writing. Chime wasn't only mine, but it felt like mine. The final version was maybe 60% of the game in my head, but even so, playing it gave me a piece I couldn't get from any other game. I topped the scoreboards on PSN before I realized that was an incredibly embarrassing thing to be doing. So I stopped, but I still played offline, and I was so happy. Chime's release fell just before GDC, and being there then was a high point, literally. On the 34th floor of the Marriott Marquis, 2 a.m., surrounded by game development heroes and loaded with vodka and stupid ideas for the future. Everyone was being so kind about the game, and I really thought I'd made it. I really did. It was all too much. I went out on the hotel balcony to get some air. San Francisco twinkling before me, the city lights, the bay so beautiful, the bridge in the distance, voices around me, the night. And then I heard a voice. Hey, Ste! I turned around. It was Matsura-san, creator of Parappa the Rapper. I'd met him a few times before, but this, right now, this felt different. It was his game that had brought me into the games industry, and now I was here with something of my own that I was proud of too. It felt like completing a circle. He opened his arms for a hug, and then a serious expression swept over his face. Ste, I have something I must say to you. And suddenly I'm nervous. Has he played chime? Does he think it's awful? But before I can chase that thought any further, he continues. Ste, I have just had a meeting with Kraftwerk. Oh. I cannot use them. You must. And there I was. My idol, my hero, the whole reason I made video games, gifting me a seminal krautrock band. If you were to draw a graph of my time in games, that moment right there, that would be the peak.
That's better.
Aoife said. I guess, I replied. I guess it's better.
But what are video games? What is Kraftwerk?
She asked. I laughed and she started to tell me about Helicon. For a Helite, a moment is much more specific. It is defined in their language as a clear point in time that happens between two heartbeats. Each memorable moment has a number from 2 billion down to 1. What's going on there? Is that me? I don't know. Hold on. Is it Spotify? That's not me. Does anyone know what that is? Next door. Okay, well, we'll remember it. Let's just assume that's a backing track, okay? So...
I'm still not sure if this is really part of your presentation.
It's multimedia. From 2 billion down to 1, that number there. And their whole lives are defined by subconscious catalogues of those important numbers. A Helite knows she has a finite number of heartbeats, a limited number of opportunities to make a moment for herself. Helites can see their narrative laid out in front of them, and they dedicate their lives to ensuring that story contains as many moments as possible, and that the definitive moment happens right at the end. There are important choices to be made along the way. People on Helicon know that moments do not just happen, but must be considered, engineered, lived. The first stage, considering what you want to do, that only involves time, but trying to make these moments happen involves sacrifice. Why? Because moments are exciting. Memorable things stick with you because they're thrilling, and that means upping your heart rate under the assumption the result will be worth it. For a Helite whose heart is always counting down to a cold, hard 0, speeding that count is a serious business. If the moment you're chasing isn't worthwhile, you can lose days, months, weeks of your life in the pursuit of nothing. Hundreds and thousands of beats, just gone. You won't get any more. So it is, a Helite depends with religious dedication upon their graph. A graph is simple, just a two-dimensional plot of an experience, happiness against time. Helites chart experiences constantly. They consider what they want to do, how they can make things as good as they can be, and the perfect route there. They think about how they can ensure their finite, ever-diminishing reserve of heartbeats is spent in the best possible way. They draw graphs, so many graphs. They draw a graph for every sunset, every God's heart. They draw a graph for their whole life, and they tend to it as they would a garden, trimming, shaping, perfecting. They know it will alter. They know that the unexpected will happen. The path may be adjusted, but the topography may stay the same. Peaks and troughs, a mountain in the distance. It's holy to them. It's everything. Aoife explained this cautiously, patiently, but I understood. Last year, I delivered a talk called The Slow Death of Punk Rock. It compared the video game industry to the music industry, specifically noting the way punk rock transitioned from a bedroom hobby into a worldwide commercial business, trading global popularity but losing a little of its edge. That was the core of the presentation, the smart bit. But the part I really enjoyed was the first 15 minutes, in which I recalled a Britney Spears concert I had attended a few months before. The concert was ridiculous and climaxed in a firework-filled, confetti-strewn performance of Till the World Ends. Last year, I showed this graph that I'd drawn of that song and took a patient audience through why the song was so clever and why, 3/4 of the way through, I burst into tears. There was a confessional comic element to that part of the slow death of punk rock, but the graph wasn't really just about justifying my emotional breakdown or making fun of myself. I've been thinking a lot about the emotional landscape of creative works, how media takes people up and brings them down again, and how that should impact on the things that I'm doing. When I drew the graph of Till the World Ends, it struck me how clever it was. When I said I cried, everybody laughed. But goddamn, why wouldn't I cry? I was a willing victim of some brilliant emotional manipulation. People sneer at pop culture, but there is so much science up there. So much science. Industrious, considered work by people who are brilliant at their jobs, brilliant at crafting graphs, Helites in spirit. Britney is not brilliant at her job, but she is the singer, and sometimes not even that. The musicians, the songwriters, the producers, they have worked together to produce that graph, precisely designed to take you on an emotional journey, precisely designed to take you somewhere memorable. Each of the people responsible for that graph there will feel as much ownership over that song as I did with Chime, and they have every right to. And that graph there, that graph is part of this graph, showing the concert. Till the World Ends happens at this part of the concert for the reason. There are peaks and troughs throughout the 90 minutes, but I'll walk away from the experience with that moment up there. And that graph is part of this graph. That's showing all the things that I did that day. It was a good day for me. Tricky start, but most days have that. It's 10 a.m. And that graph is part of this graph, showing the whole of my life. Yeah. And as you die, in the space between your last 2 heartbeats, you'll remember all of these moments here. Those are the things that made you. Those are the things that you lived for. That is what life is.
What is the opposite of that moment on the skyscraper?
Aoife is whispering now, 4,000 heartbeats into our conversation, her voice soft and sad and distorted by a million suns. Oh, that's easy, I say. As Chime was being finished, I began pitching a game called Circles. The concept was simple, really simple. It was about flocking, and it was about physics, and it was about collectibles misspelt, and it was about geolocation. It was heavy on buzzwords, but with an elegant mainstream core and friendly, sweet commercial surface. It was the game I had wanted to build since arriving at the company. If Chime was my heart, Circles was my head. A dozen new ideas bound to a simple gameplay loop. After one round of pitches, it was signed for a new hardware platform, and it was given a substantial, almost indulgent budget. The future was so bright, and I could see it all. My graph was a landscape stretching out in front, and the horizon was the next peak, this project, the perfect next step from Chime. Finding such support so quickly, that was a dream, and the covert, almost illicit thrill of working on unannounced hardware made it feel unreal. Best of all, the game was going to be simple, interesting, fun, new, and mine. And you know how the story is going to end, because you know the game doesn't exist. I can tell you, just as I told Aoife, exactly where I was when I heard the news. It was 9 months into development, a summer evening, and I was with some non-gaming friends in a student union in central London, planning another ridiculous project, a Game Boy chiptune orchestra. I was full of stupid dreams, stupid ideas, when my phone rang. It was the game's producer. I took the call in a corridor, and I can remember everything so vividly. The photocopy notices on the pinboard in front of me, thumbprint on the light switch, peeling paint on a lukewarm radiator. "Have you seen? It's over," she said. I didn't understand. "They've killed the game. It's over. Check your mail." And that was that. I went back into the union and I pretended to my friends that everything was fine. It wasn't fine. It was over. Worse, it wasn't even over, not quite. The game was immediately picked up by another big publisher and continued in various forms and on a variety of reduced budgets for another 6 months. But they couldn't make the numbers work, and again, eventually it was canned too. But while that second heartbreak was painful and the process was protracted, it was nothing like the first, which came from nowhere and made me feel sick to my stomach. The first official reason for ending development was not that the game was failing, but that the publisher had changed their market outlook and decided the platform had to be less social, more hardcore. The second, told to us off the record, was that our budget was being taken out of development and put into marketing, used to sell a super violent third-person action-adventure sequel instead. Sick to my stomach. But perhaps I'd be angrier if I thought it was wholly true. While Circle's dynamic was simple and addictive, it never gave me anything. If the game was everything I thought it should have been, everything I assumed it would be, if I'd been a better designer, if I'd made it more than those buzzwords, given the publisher a moment they couldn't forget, given me a moment I couldn't forget, then how could they have let the game go, knowing they were taking the experience away from millions of would-be consumers? No. Circle's death was my fault. It was a collection of wonderful selling points, a vanity project, the next step in my career. I was thinking about a graph, but it was only my own. My lesson was learnt, but it was learnt late, much too late. We're getting to something important here, I think. If you ask me to think about circles, all I remember in that instant is a moment of failure. The corridor, the notices on the walls, the ways the pins are grouped on the pinboard, the color, the heartbeat frozen in time. That is basically all I have. When you say circles to me, I do not think of the countless hours we put into developing the characters, writing documents, prototyping, designing levels, iterating, playtesting, iterating. I just think of that one moment of despair. And that's the way memory works. I want you to look at this graph of Circle's development and how happy I was. It begins with this here, the rising feeling, that I've got something quite cool, something I'm pretty proud of. And then there, right up there, that's the peak when it's signed and everything looks amazing. And then there's this slow grind of prototyping, reshaping, prototyping. I like that part. I'm a game designer, I enjoy it. But none of it is spectacular. There's no breakthrough moment, nothing that stands out, just this kind of gentle undulation until that, here, this. Boom. We remember emotional extremes. When someone mentions circles to me, that is what I think of. And if I think harder, maybe I remember the point it was signed, maybe a couple of the gameplay points, but mostly it's down there. Here's the Britney concert again. If you look at the graph, there is a lot of boring stuff here. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff as well, which I enjoy. Here's the bit where she comes out on an Egyptian flotilla, and she's being pushed around. Here's where she blows Baby One More Time in a montage of jazz songs. Here's one of the songs I like. There's Till the World Ends. Largely, I'm bored until the end, and that part blows me away. It blows everything away. A few weeks after the concert, I only remember those points. I remember the song I like, I remember the Egyptian flotilla. A year later, all I remember is the confetti and just that moment of euphoria. Another example. I went to see The Knife a couple of months ago. I don't know if you know The Knife, but they're one of my favorite bands, genuinely love them. Their last album, divisive. The concert, even more so. I mean, it's barely a concert. They come out, they put on the CD, and then they dance around to the CD, which is genuinely something I do at home, right? And I've paid 30 quid for this. And I am furious, livid at this. I can't believe it. And what do you do when you're angry? You go home and you spew that disgust all over social media. So I did that, right? I'm furious. But then it changes. A few weeks later, I remember it in a different way. I remember being sort of generally annoyed, walking around in a bit of a huff. But I also remember the moment they came on stage dressed in these sparkly hoodies with all kinds of weird instruments. I remember this moment where they're whirling around these neon tubes. It makes this wind sound, fills the hall with natural wind music. It's incredible, right? It's awesome. And I remember the first time they started dancing as well. As boring as the dancing turned out to be, at first it's awesome. So I remember the good stuff and I discard all of this tedium, this filler. And that's weird, right? Your average opinion on something changes as your memories of it are simplified. When you develop an experience for someone, any kind of experience, it helps to remember that. As well as thinking about the graph, working out how you can tease the player to the highest point, just as a helite does. You need to know that a few weeks after putting it down, the player won't remember anything but those peaks. And 6 months later, maybe, if you're lucky, they'll remember one moment, your game's single heartbeat. And this is massive. This is a huge deal. I mean, it's scary because it means someone's permanent opinion of your game comes down to one moment, but that rule goes for everyone. If you're a small developer working on a labor of love, that is absolutely brilliant. Your game, whatever the team size, whatever the budget, gets to create one moment for the player, one thing they'll remember when someone says your game's name to them. And that moment will stay with them forever, filed alongside moments created by the biggest teams producing AAA products. And maybe some of you here are working on one of them, in which case, well done, good luck. But the rules still apply to you. Memory and time are the greatest levelers. There's an expression on Helicon, living along the X. It means living your life as a point moving along the line of the x-axis of the graph, neither happy nor sad. It is time wasted. Your beats go down and no moments are recorded. It is when you, the player, or you, the human, you, the helite, when you're alive, nothing more. Aoife tells me that living along the X is what happens when a helite hits their moment too early. The graphs towards that are constructed in peaks and troughs. Without disappointments like circles, triumphs like chime don't seem as memorable, and vice versa. Helites know as much as we do that we learn from failure, but peaks grow, and the biggest peak should come right at the end, or you might always live in its shadow. Helites learn early to construct their lives to peak in the final beats. If it happens too soon, by accident or design, there can be problems. It can leave you with nowhere to go, nowhere except along the X. When Aoife tells me this, she wonders if we have an equivalent. Our lives seem so haphazard to her, so unplanned. We're reckless with our hearts, and when we're not reckless, we're lazy. All because we're afraid to recognize death. I know her question is pointed. I feel the words slice through me, but I don't want to think about that. And besides, I think I've seen this happen somewhere else. I tell Aoife about Balloon. I've been thinking a lot about Balloon recently. He's the star of my favorite video on YouTube. So this is Balloon. Balloon is a man. He's a big man, and like a lot of people on YouTube, on the internet, he's obsessed with a specific thing. In Balloon's case, that thing is balloons. He loves balloons, and it is not clear to me, even as a subscriber, how Balloon loves balloons, whether it is in that slightly creepy way that men on the internet love things, or whether he just loves balloons. But he reviews balloons, he talks about balloons, he gets on balloons, and Balloon's one dream, one single dream, is to get in a balloon. All he's ever wanted is to be in a balloon. And of course this can't happen because, well, for reasons of physics and size. Balloon is a big man, and balloons are not big things generally. But then one day, some balloons arrive at Balloon's place that he might be able to get in. And he does that thing. He unboxes them and he shows you them. The latex tells you about that. And it's really exciting. He's enthusiastic. He's a little bit nerdy, nasal voice, but it's cute watching him get excited about these balloons. He doesn't try to get inside it yet. But then one day he uploads 2 videos to YouTube. Attempt number 2 and attempt number 3. He doesn't upload attempt number 1. Not sure why. Attempt number 2 begins like this. Balloon is enthusiastic and sticks his head inside the balloon. He has a plan, and the plan is to pull it over him in stages. First his head, then his arms, then his waist, then his knees. It's a fair plan. It seems basically pretty logical. Except Balloon forgets something. I mean, this is the first time he's ever tried to get inside a balloon, so it's fair enough, I suppose. But this is a dangerous occupation. Balloon forgets that between your arm and your body, there is a space where air can escape. And as he pulls it down, thank you. It was a great leap of logic. And as he pulls it down over his waist, the air starts to escape. And Balloon feels this happening. He hears that telltale, potentially fatal hiss. And he keeps going. Maybe if he can get it far enough down, it won't matter. But the balloon is getting too small, too quickly. And he ends up like this. And that's funny, right? Except for it's not funny, because it's a man with a skin-tight latex thing over his face. And he cannot breathe. Worse, he cannot move his arms to get free. And he is struggling like a terrible Silent Hill first-generation model, like this, falling over, and then he somehow gets an arm through and he tears it away from his mouth. And then, in classic Balloon understatement, says, sort of stumbles up to camera and goes, "Oh, that was a close one. Thanks, Balloon. I'm relieved." Actually, there's a picture of him doing that. There we go. That was a close one. But he is not disheartened, and attempt 3 happens. This time he's learned from his mistake, and he understands there is this air thing here, so this time he strategizes. No pausing here, just straight over to the waist. Head in, and then holy shit. Suddenly, most of Balloon is inside the balloon. And he can see it. You can tell he can see it. And you can see him misted out right there. And he's just got to get it over his feet. And there's a little bit of scare. Maybe it'll pop. Or maybe he won't manage it or something. But he does. He steps inside. He ties up the balloon. And then he's inside. And he looks around. You see him looking around. And you can hear this kind of like just moment of wonder. And he touches the skin of the balloon like this. And there's a pause. And he says this thing that haunts me, a thing that will live with me forever. He says, "Okay, I'm inside the balloon. Now what?" Holy shit. Balloon's story, oops, we're not there yet. Balloon's story is everything I want my stories to be. It's superficially funny, right? It's about a big fat man trying to get inside a balloon. You don't get funnier than that. That's gold, right? YouTube gold right there. And it's stupid and ridiculous, and everyone can laugh along with the story. But then, right at the end, it hits you with this twist of unbelievable poignancy. I think we can all recognize that moment. Now what? Now what? I feel comfortable saying that here, right here, on Balloon's graph, that's Balloon's moment. Over here, Balloon is born. And over here, and hopefully it's a long time away, but Balloon dies. And somewhere along this line, there are successes, small successes, big successes, near catastrophic failures. Somewhere along this timeline, he crawls inside a balloon, a big latex balloon, and he looks outwards, gazes around at this new world, this world he's always dreamt of, and says, "Now what?" That's the trouble with climactic moments. If you achieve something you've always wanted to achieve, you're left with this emptiness. You no longer have any direction, and it's the easiest thing to do nothing. What does this say about our graphs, our lives, my life? And what of video games? How many of you have played a game to a point and then just stopped? Not because of frustration or boredom, but because you'd succeeded in some kind of personal quest that left you satisfied, then somehow disinterested. Ideally, the moment you finish is the moment the creator intends. You reach the end of the game and you walk away, but that is not always the case. Sometimes a moment is so great, so powerful, that it should be a full stop. And then what? What if the thing that made you happy was not the moment itself, but the pursuit of that moment? Aoife starts to cry. Just like a helite trades their heartbeats for a worthwhile point in their life, so you, as a game developer, trade your time and budget for the moments in your game you want people to remember. Moment-to-moment gameplay has a different resonance in our industry. People use it to refer to the actions players spend 95% of their time performing again and again and again. It makes sense to spend time getting those right. Are those the moments that a player will remember? No, they're not. But they can be obstructions to those moments. People cite the jump in Mario 64 as the best example of getting the basics right. How Miyamoto spent months and months running this character around in a room until it felt just right. Discovering that jump, which you do pretty early on, maybe in the first few seconds, that is a moment. Using it for the first time feels special, but soon you're used to it. And it becomes a victory for game design, mostly because you don't notice it. The moment there is superseded by other points of discovery, the world, the level design, the perfect balance. Perhaps it's even forgotten, but if it didn't exist, the players would never experience all the other moments. There was no moment like that jump in Circles, no initial point of satisfaction or delight that compelled people to discover any of the bigger moments. Moments are not necessarily set pieces. They might be, but they can just as easily be the way a jump feels, the harmony between soundtrack and visuals, an unexpected enemy, a plot point that makes you gasp, the things that surprise and delight for good and for bad. While the player may only take one away, you need to keep them interested with little hits, the undulation, rise and fall. Tend to your graph as you would a garden. Now, for a linear medium, this is simple, right? With a movie, a piece of music, a concert, a book, creators have explicit control over when events happen. This axis is theirs to play with. They can take the audience up and they can take them down. They know when they'll experience highs and lows, exactly when they intend. But for a video game, it's different. For a video game, the x-axis belongs to the player too. The graph depends on their actions, how they interact with the world. So, what is the best parallel here if it's not stories, if it's not movies? It's life, right? As humans, as Heelites, as game designers, we must embrace the unexpected. Players will make their way across our graph at their own pace, and sometimes they will go in directions, literal and metaphorical, that we could not foresee. The graphs will be redrawn, but if our moments are strong enough, the player will be drawn back to the path we've crafted for them. That is life. There is no control, there is only guidance. Games are like life, and life is a game. Not that long ago, I figured out that that was kind of what I'm good at, what I enjoy, working out moments, working out what moments should be and helping people find them. So that's what I'm doing now, and that was the logo that I showed you at the start. This thing, I hate the term, but it's a creative consultancy for video games, something I've built in a partnership with my friend, journalist Lee Alexander. It's useful, I think, and I wish I'd had recourse to it during Circles, but more personally, it's getting my graph on track. Agency gives me what I need, the opportunity to solve problems, communicate, and work with brilliant people every single day. It makes me feel like I'm heading towards something and making a difference, not just treading water anymore. Heading somewhere is the thing. Think about the graph of your game. It's like a Heelites. You have this grand goal that remains somewhere on the horizon, visible but just out of reach, and you keep it from the player until you're fine with them walking away. That final moment you've constructed should be their moment. When they get there, their heart will race. They'll feel pure delight, exhilaration, and absolute emotional closure. Zoom, magnify, and you find those smaller peaks, little graphs themselves that lead the player there. These are not necessarily set pieces, and you should not think of them like that. There are things like moment-to-moment gameplay, the thing that was missing from Circles, and also the moments of serendipity you didn't plan for, but that you adapt into your work. They're like Cario cards, the card game I worked on, or One Life Left, or the writing I do, like this lecture. They're beautiful distractions that might lead places somewhere in the future, and they are entirely unplanned. And finally, recognize that even with the most meticulously designed graphs and the finest of plans, you're making something that is out of your control. Your dream involves the participation of other people. That's the player in games. But in life, it's a party high up in a skyscraper, a bastard marketing department, the right size of balloon, a plane flying overhead at just the right time, a phone call in the middle of the night. If the stars don't align, it might never happen, and you'll have to redraw your graph again. You can do that. Draw, react, draw again. We do our best. That's all we can do. That is life. We like to pretend we're the authors of our own narrative, writing great stories, and to some extent we are. Peaks and troughs, heartbeats and memory. How do you want the thing you're making to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered? The graphs of those two things are inextricably linked. Stop for a moment. What are you doing with your 2 billion beats? Are you creating moments for yourself, or are you just letting them happen?
It's too much.
Says Aoife.
This is all too much.
On Helicon, you begin life with 2 billion heartbeats. That is a 10-digit number. When a helite is 32 Earth years old, that number becomes 1 billion. And then, a single beat later, the 10-digit number becomes 9. It's a huge moment in a helite's life. They call it a 9-digit crisis. It's when your number gets noticeably smaller and the countdown starts to threaten. You question your graph. How did you get here? Where are you going? Are you doing the right thing with your beats? Half of them are gone now. You won't get any more. Aoife went through this a while ago, she tells me, but she brushes off questions about her moments with silence or questions back to me. Or perhaps she doesn't hear them because the line to Helicon is getting worse and worse, her voice getting faint. Have I been living along the X, she asks. I don't know, I say. Yes, I say. 18 months ago, long before agency, I set up a studio with a group of ex-colleagues. We worked with a famous rapper to make a game, and it was sort of fun. I lived so many stupid stories. I was happy and I was sad. I didn't do a single thing I will remember when I'm dying, and that worried me so much. I solved a few problems, I created some small things. I've done nothing worth remembering. Had nothing I could call a moment in 2 years. Except there was one single thing that made me think video games are cool. I have a friend I met on the internet. We'd never met in real life. And it was a scary moment, that first meeting. We'd been talking for a couple of years. And we met, and as serendipity, fate would have it, another friend's band was playing in London that night. And he said, oh, I'll put you on the guest list. It's pretty cool to be on the guest list, right? It's pretty cool to go up to the door and say, I'm on the guest list, and go inside. The problem was twofold. Thank you. One, it was in East London. I don't know if you guys know what East London is like, but it's sort of like that. So I don't go to East London very much. Secondly, being on the guest list for a concert is almost exactly the same as not being on the guest list. It generally involves going up to a surly bouncer on the door, in East London, someone who looks like him, and saying, hi, sorry, I'm Ste. I think I'm on the guest list, and them going, nope, you're not. That's mortifying enough when you're alone, but when you're with a new person, a person who somehow thinks you're cool and you're trying to impress, it's terrible. So I was thinking about this. I was traveling with Sophie to the concert and thinking about this all the way there. It was the only thing on my mind, and she was making small talk, but I just seemed nervous. And I guess I seemed nervous about meeting her, but all I was thinking about was this moment with this guy and how he was going to say, you're not on the guest list, and I was going to look stupid in front of her and I was going to blow everything. So it was, we arrived at the venue, and I walk nervously up to the guy, and I look him in the eye, and I say, hi, and before I can say anything, he says, Ste Curran, and you go. And I've never seen him before in my life. He just ushers me inside. And I spend the whole of the gig just standing there next to Sophie, who's looking at me like I'm the coolest guy in London because I know everyone, and I can get in there thinking, what the hell just happened? Anyway, to cut a very long investigative story short, it turns out I played Ghost Recon with him on Xbox Live and he recognized me. So there we go. For one moment in one girl's eyes, me, this guy right here, I was the coolest person in all London. That is fun. And you can blame it on video games. Just about. I couldn't have planned it. I'll remember it, a stupid moment in a couple of years drifting along the X. Agency is my attempt to move off that axis. Kind of our attempt to help games move off it too, to locate moments, to eliminate aimlessness. Your life, your game needs that goal in the distance, something you really want to achieve. Will you get there? Who knows? but the pursuit is inertia. The line between this point and that peak, it'll be full of things you can't predict, but when they happen, you need to own them. Treasure serendipity as much as skill. Plot your graph, chase your goal, make the most of the good things that come your way, because you cannot control the things you're going to remember. Your selective memory cares as much as it does for your perfect plans as it does for your budget. So, 10 years since I started making games, the graph behind me has these peaks and troughs, and after some time along the X, there's a new mountain in the distance. So, now what? It's 3 hours after Aoife connected to me, and the line is failing.
Stephen,
She says,
I need to tell you something before I go. Don't say anything, just listen. Soon you'll go to sleep, and in the morning you'll wake, and this will seem like a dream. It's not. So write this down. I am Aoife from Helicon, a planet 1,000 million light years from you. I am a scientist and anthropologist. I love people. I've always felt alone. But I couldn't believe I was alone, not in a universe the size of the one we share. I wanted to hear stories from another planet. That was to be my moment. Contact. I worked so hard for that, harder than anything. I spent so many beats. I planned to spend many more. But it worked too soon. I heard your voice. My graph hit a peak I know it will never surpass, and that was so frightening. I felt my moment. Like you say, now what?
Everyone on Helicon is so certain about everything. No one on your planet really knows what they're doing, though sometimes they pretend. We place so much faith in graphs. You forget you're dying. You're dying right now. But somehow, you still find moments. Perhaps it's okay to live along the X for a while. Perhaps it's time to seek something new. Perhaps we need to learn to live in the middle, the space in between. Draw a graph, close your eyes, cross your fingers and draw it again. All I know is that we are not the things we have been through. We are only our moments. And this was mine. You are mine.
Thank you.
Aoife says. And in the time it takes a heart to beat, our conversation is over. The end. Thanks, guys. And thanks to Sarah, who was a brilliant Aoife during that as well. So a round of applause for her. She was excellent. Cool. Thank you all for coming. That's it.